Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar event. My name is Josh. I'm going to be your presenter today. It's 12:30 Eastern time here. We're going to go ahead and get started. A few things before we get started on our topic. We're talking about adding a fund and its associated accounts in Church Windows Accounting today. But before we get started, if you have questions, please type those into the chat portion of the Demio control panel. I will do my best to keep an eye on those. If I can't get to answering them during the event, I'll certainly be happy to stick around and get those answered after. Please keep the questions on topic, meaning about adding a fund, associated accounts. There may be another webinar event that's better suited for the questions that you have. Or, of course, our support techs are available here until 5 p.m. Eastern Time today, 800-533-5227, or support@churchwindows.com. Today's topic is taken from the A102 workbook, pages 16 to 20. Again, Accounting 102, pages 16 to 20. So if you have the workbook, you may choose to, open that to that page and follow along, as that's the material I'm using for the printed material today. As always, we are recording today's webinar event, and we will release it out on our resource center at some point here in the next 24 to 48 hours, or as soon as possible. So let's go ahead and get started on page 16 here. So you can add accounts, of course, to the chart of accounts in Church Windows Accounting at any time throughout the year, okay? You're not limited to just adding them at, say, the start of the year or at the end of the year. You can add new accounts, including funds, at any time, okay? There are several places, or a couple different places, where accounts can be added, all right? So one of the things is on page 16 it talks about is add an account or fund from the chart of accounts tree view. And what it's talking about there is when we go to manage accounts here in the center, or manage accounts in view in the upper left, it opens our chart of accounts tab. And right over here on the very right hand side of our chart of accounts, we see several tabs: detail, balance, tree view, vendor payee, files, documents. It's because we have our Huntington Bank checking, but every account, as we click on it through the chart of accounts, has this tab called tree view. And when we click on that, it opens the tree view to show essentially all of our accounts organized as they would it would appear on our balance sheet. So it shows our assets, then our liabilities, then our funds. And then when we drill down into our funds, we would then see the subsequent income and expenses as they relate or are linked to those funds, okay? So what is a little known fact about Church Windows Accounting here is accounts can be added or edited here, okay? So if I go or hover over, say, assets, and I right click, notice it gives them a floating or a menu, an option that comes that says add new asset. If I click on that, it opens up add account, add a new asset. So you can do that here on any of them. If you choose right click over liabilities, you can choose add new liability. Or if we right click here and we choose add a new fund, it will allow us to add a new fund. And if we go down even further, right clicking over something like our general operating, it says add a fund, add an income account to general fund, add an expense account, or edit general operating fund. So you can do a whole lot on the tree view tab at the chart of accounts simply by right clicking over those. And so that's just one way to be able to do that. So one of the things that we're going to talk about here is adding a fund. So if I click on add a fund, it opens up the window that says add a fund. And so as we would see under our setup chart of accounts window, it would allow us to enter the fund name, the fund balance account name, the account number, and then choose the subsequent subtotal where that account belongs, or fund as the case may be. And as it is, I don't have any other subtotals in my total funds. So this is just one way of being able to edit that. And I like to point out where you're, as far as accounts are concerned here, if we go to like expenses and I go right click over supply pass-through and choose edit, we can even go so far as to choose or change the subtotal that an account is linked to or is listed under as well. So just be aware, there's a lot of flexibility that you have simply by using these functions or options on the tree view tab. I use these all the time on my support calls. simply because it allows us to really drill down and centralize focus on one particular task or area or what have you. So in addition to being able to edit or change the subtotal, I can also edit account names here or account numbers. Yet I can do that right here on the chart of accounts window too by simply clicking under account name or number and change them. Funds have multiple components. So when we want to edit a fund, we typically will want to right click and choose edit, because it's not only the fund account name itself, fund name, but also the fund balance account name that may be changed, that may need to be changed as well, and often are. There's two components of the fund. There's the fund and the fund balance account name, okay? So just be aware when you're editing a fund, you might want to do it this way so you can make sure you're editing both properly, okay? The other way to add accounts is to go, and we're on page 17 here, is add a fund from the chart of accounts. Well, that's the chart of accounts in the tree view. That's the one where it is. Sorry, that's where we're going to do that. So we're going to choose add a new fund, and we're going to call this music fund. And then I tab down. It adds the word balance to it. I'm good with that. I now have to tab down, and it now prompts me to enter an account number. I've done the work to investigate which account number I want. If I'm unsure, I might want to click cancel out of it and collapse all, and maybe go down into my fund balances accounts names here or numbers and determine which account number I'm going to use. So now that we've determined that, we'll go back here. We'll type in music fund, and then we tab down, and I've decided I'm going to give this 3.45.100, and there is no other subtotal here other than total fund balances. I'm going to simply click OK. Okay. So we now notice that on the tree view tab, well, it's added and on the left, of course, in our chart of accounts, but now we see that it's listed on our tree view tab under our main memorial fund here and above Tiny Tots Preschool, but there's no plus sign next to that music fund. Why? Because we have not added the necessary income and expense accounts that we normally will need in order for the fund to function properly. Okay, so in order for a fund to function correctly, we've got to have a way of being able to receive or flow or credit new income into the fund throughout the year, and then we have to have an expense in order to typically expense or spend money out of that fund. Okay, so we could do that here. So we could right click over music fund and choose add a fund, add a subledger, because it now meets the criteria to be a main fund with sub funds. Or I can do add income or expense, and because it has no activity, no income or expense accounts, it will even go so far as to allow me to delete that here or edit it if I wish. Okay, so we can do add income account, so we'll do that. We'll do add income account, and we'll call this music fund income. Tab down, again, we're going to leave the same number structure, 445,100. And under total income now, I do have some other subtotals I can choose. This makes sense. We're going to put this into total other fund income and simply click OK. So we now notice that the music fund now has at least a plus sign next to it to reflect the income. Okay, the other way that we can add accounts to these, and we're on at the bottom of page 18, folks, is to go up to up at the top here. We close out of our chart of accounts, and we're going to go right up here to manage accounts and accounts plus minus. Okay, so once we click on that, then it gives us the various account types: assets, receivable clients, liabilities, accounts payable vendors, fund, income, or an expense. So I've now have to add an expense to my new music fund. I can do that by simply clicking on expense, and here from the pull down menu, when it's opening up my setup chart of accounts window, click the down arrow, and notice if I scroll down here now, my new music fund appears there. So here's my new music fund. I'm going to call this now under the account name music fund expense. Get that capitalized. Tab down, 500, it starts with a 5, and I've checked and I know that 545,100 is available, again for consistency's sake. And while I'm here, I'm going to see if I can choose a subtotal where that belongs, and we're going to make this is a designated fund. I guess we could either probably do either worship expenses or designated. It really depends on how we could even go so far as to go into subtotals and create a new subtotal called total music fund. For a single income or a single expense account, it's kind of redundant. So for the time being, I'm just going to choose designated fund, and we're simply going to click add account. So now when we look over on our chart of accounts tab on the right of our setup chart of accounts, we can clearly see music fund now has our 3,345,100, the income account 445,100, or the expense account of 5.45.100. So we have now added the minimum number of accounts in order for my new music fund to function and work correctly. Okay? So that, folks, is how we add a fund. Sure, I can go into donations and I can add a new giving account there, called Music Fund Giving or something there, and I can link this together. If I were to do that, I would go up to transactions, transfer donations, maybe click on the default account links. I would find my new giving account for Music Fund here. It would have blank debit and credit accounts. I would simply populate that right here. So that is how you can quickly and easily, folks, set up all the components for a fund and quickly and easily check that. Okay, so again, manage accounts, find my music fund. Here's my music fund. I choose that. I jump over to my tree view tab right here. Here's my music fund already highlighted. I click on it. I clearly see income, and I've got at least one income and one expense. I can now rest assured that I've set up that fund with, again, the minimum components in order for the fund to function and report and record properly. Okay. There are a couple ways you could go about checking that as well. We could go to something like the fund activity report. So, reports and export, financial, fund activity report. I can go to funds and do unselect all and move over my music fund. Make sure to include accounts with zero balances and click print, and it will bring up my fund activity report with my music fund balance account and the income and the expense. So again, folks, there's multiple ways to skin the proverbial cat in the Church Windows accounting software for that. So just keep in mind, a fund requires typically an income and an expense account, at least one, and in some cases more, depending on what the purpose of the fund, what purpose the fund serves. Okay. So as we go back into our chart of accounts again here and we collapse all and we look at something like our general operating fund and go to our tree view, okay? So yes, we click on income accounts and we notice, hey, we've got a dozen income accounts linked to our general fund. And then under our expenses, we might have several dozen expense accounts. So funds might have one income, one expense. They might have multiple. What does the fund do? I can pretty much set up as many income and expense accounts to a fund as I need or want. Okay? So just be aware. There's one account fund in this window, this list, that does not have an income and an expense account, and that is our net fixed asset fund. Why? Because that is any changes in value to our net fixed assets we do not want to see on our treasurer's report. Doesn't represent real physical cash. So anything that we're going to be doing to change in building, land, building grounds, building contents, what have you, are going to be posted directly to the asset and the fund. Okay? The treasurer's report will not reflect that. Therefore, this particular fund does not have an income or an expense. No giving comes in from donations for it. There's nothing on the treasurer's report that we want to see that is affecting our net fixed asset fund balance account. Therefore, it does not have an income or an expense. Folks, this is literally the only time that a fund would not have an income or an expense. Otherwise, we're going to want to have an income or an expense linked to each one of our funds. Okay? So let me take a quick look here. Okay, on page 19, it does talk about adding a vendor. It's not a fund, but I do want to kind of complete the topic here. So if we can still go up to our liabilities, click on accounts payable, right-click over it, add new liability or add an income, add an accounts payable vendor here the same exact way. Whether it's from the tree view tab on the chart of accounts or by going up to manage accounts, accounts plus minus, and going to accounts payable vendors, they can be added in either the tree view tab on the chart of accounts or on the accounts plus minus the same exact way. So that, folks, is where we are going to leave our topic for today.